Good night, Shabbos, everyone. Good night, Shabbos, Parshas Pinchas in America. Parshas Mattos here in Eretz Yisrael. We have an incredible advantage this year here in Eretz Yisrael. Whenever the Parshas, Mattos and Masei are separated from each other, we have a chance to really look at them as separate entities. Often we jumble them together, and there's a lot of crazy activity that goes on in Masei. And I tend to focus more on Masei than on Mattos. But still something beautiful, I think, in Parshas Mattos. I think something that has to be recognized, and it's a universal message. It doesn't matter which Parsha it is. It's a message for the 3 weeks. It's a message for our lives. There are really 3 parts to the Parsha. And the first part of the Parsha is the Parsha of Nidorim, is vows and promises that a person makes. The second is the war with Midian and the death of Bilam. And the third is the conversation that took place with Reuven and Gad, eventually also with half the tribe of Manasseh. But as far as settling the land of Israel, or not settling the land of Israel, and living in Transjordan. So, what's the wonder? What's the connective tissue between these parts of the Parsha? We don't often spend enough time on that, but we have to ask. Things that are put together in a Parsha, there's a reason, juxtapositions, there's a reason why things are placed according to many authorities, a reason why things are placed next to each other in the Torah. So to understand what this Parsha is really about, what the theme of the Parsha, the message of the Parsha is, why this Parsha is always inside of the 3 weeks, let's begin with the whole concept of Nidarim, the whole concept of making vows. There's a fair amount of detail in the Torah Shebachsav, in the written Torah, but there's an incredible amount of detail in the Torah Shebal Peh, in the oral Torah. When Rabbi Nasi wrote over the oral Torah, split it into 6 sections. One of those sections was called Nashim, was called things that deal with women or marriage and divorce, and in there he put all of those kinds of laws. In the 3rd tractate, he put the tractate of Nidarim, of vows. And one has to wonder, as the Rambam does in his Pirsha Mishnayos, one has to wonder what in the world are vows doing in Nashim, doing in that section that deals, that like bookshelf that deals with marriage and divorce laws. So the simple understanding, as explained by the Rambam and many other commentaries, is that there's a whole section of law about Nidarim, about vows, that a husband is allowed to be mefer. He is allowed to annul or undo the vows of his wife. And therefore it impacts marriage, and if it impacts marriage, so then it belongs in Seder Nashim. Beautiful. The only problem with that answer is that section that really justifies why it's there in the section of Nashim, that doesn't begin until chapter 10. 10 massive chapters, 9 massive chapters, until we get to that chapter that deals with nullification of vows within the context of marriage. So maybe there's something else that's going on. So I think that the real issue of vows, what vows is really about, what the whole concept, what the whole parsha, what the whole sugya of vows is that it's all about being sensitive to the nuances of speech. Because when you make a vow, when you turn something prohibited that it was always permissible, when you say that I will never have any connection with that, or I divorce myself, I separate myself from such a thing, so then when you say it in a certain way, it could be meaningless. When you say it in a little bit of a different way, all of a sudden you're on the hook. When you make a promise for something, there are certain ways, certain languages that you use that are nothing, that are just speech. But there are certain ways that you use, certain things that you say that lock you in. And therefore, the entire concept of vows is all about sensitivity to the nuance of speech. The koyach hadibur, that power of speech that God gave us when he blew breath into our nostrils, and the Aramaic translation says that was the ruach mamala, the ability to be able to speak, which means the ability to be able to communicate, which means the ability to be able to take out what was inside of me and to be able to bring it out into the world. In order to be able to do that in an effective kind of way, to be able to connect my worlds, to be able to take me and to allow myself to be expressed inside of my world, so that I have to be aware of the nuances of the words that I'm saying. In essence, I have to be able to communicate. I have to be able to understand me, to understand myself, to understand what's going on inside of me, and then to be able to communicate that, to be able to express that, to be sensitive to the words that I'm using so that it comes out and makes the kind of connection that I want it to make. If I'm tired and I say I'm hungry, I haven't expressed myself. If I say I'm bored, but I'm really depressed, then I haven't expressed myself. I have to know me, and I have to know how to convey me. I have to be able to communicate. And communication is the essence of marriage. And therefore a Masechta tractate that deals with communication, which focuses on the sensitivity that allows good communication, that belongs in Seder Nashim, that belongs in the laws of marriage, that belongs in that section. And that's why Nidarim, that's why the whole thing, the whole issue that deals with vows, why it has to be here in Seder Nashim, why it has to be amongst the laws of marriage. Because ultimately vows are all about communication. And that's the theme of this week's Parsha. It's all about how you use the Koach HaDibur. Vows, we turn to the leaders of the Jewish people so that they can teach everybody else how to communicate correctly, how to understand yourself, and to be able to bring yourself out into the world. This Parsha of Nidarim was said to the heads of the Mattos, to the heads of the tribes. Give it to them first. Let them understand it and then teach that by example to the rest of us. Then we have the death of Bilam. Oh, we were responsible for what we did. We brought ourselves down. But we need to also recognize that what Bilam did by trying to curse the Jewish people, by using his incredible Koach HaDibur, his incredible ability to be able to speak, and to be able to sully that, to be able to use that for negative things, to destroy people, to knock down people's worlds, it's just a poignant reminder to us, be careful with the way you communicate and the things you say. And then finally the negotiations with Reuven and Gad and half the tribe of Manasseh, getting them to be able to verbalize better what the issues were in their lives, what their real goals were, what their real values and morals were, what they were really all about. And in the middle of that Parsha, there's a separation, there's a break. Moshe Rabbeinu gives them a chance to regroup, to rethink. Who are you? What do you really value? What are you really about? Because then you'll be able to communicate yourself correctly. And you'll be able to affect the world in a very positive way. 3 weeks we commemorate the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. We commemorate what happens with Sinas Chinam. Sinas Chinam, unjustified hate, only comes about because I don't know who I am. I'm uncomfortable with me, and therefore I'm uncomfortable with you. Get to know you so that you can communicate correctly, so that you don't have to speak lashon hara about others. You don't have to knock them down. You don't have to degrade them. You don't have to criticize them. You don't have to speak negatively about them. This is the time to work on communication, hence the Parsha of communication is here in the 3 weeks. Before we enter Eretz Yisrael, before we hear the final speech of Moshe, we, the people of the world, of the word, Hakol Kol Yaakov, the people who's got the voice of Jacob, the people of speech, the people of communication, we have to get straight what we're feeling so we can convey the messages that we need to convey both to God to our fellow Jews and to the world we live in. By the way, look at the opening words of the Parsha. Usually prophecies come with Kaisaimer, say like this, thus said. But here it says, Zeh Hadavar, this is it. The Parsha begins reminding us, Zeh Hadavar, you gotta be clear. And when you're clear, your world will be clear. Your life will be clear. Your relationship with God will be clear. Your relationship with those that are around you that you love will be clear. Everything you do will have clarity. Zeh Hadavar. Get it straight. Get it straight inside so you can bring that in the most beautiful way outside into the world. Everyone should have a beautiful, wonderful, awesome, amazing Shabbos.